Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sorting Hat Podcast, the show where everything and anything can and will be sorted. I, as always, am your host, Michael Barryte, joined by my co-host, Brice.
Hey, have you heard the good news?
Oh, what good news is that?
Jesus.
Yo, he is risen.
He's risen indeed.
He is risen indeed. That was our guest who dictates the theme, which we will be sorting into the various houses of Hogwarts. That was David Miller.
Hello.
Hey, David, welcome.
Thanks.
For those unfamiliar, David Miller is a comedian and improviser in the Los Angeles area, and he is also the host of Mountain Dew's Twitch channel.
Yeah.
So
I play video games for the internet.
Yes.
For a soda.
Yes. And independent of any of those qualifications, we are going to be sorting Bible studies because you have the very unique qualification that you are a pastor's son.
Yeah, PKs. That's what we call pastors' kids. Not we. That's what, I guess
You?
Well, it's what everybody says it. Like, from where I grew up, they're like, oh yeah, PKs. People who understand, who are in that world, they get it. They've heard it before.
And you,
There's
however,
one for the PKs out there.
Yeah, shout out to all the PKs. We go one of two ways.
what are the two ways?
We stay in the church, or we definitely don't.
And you are on the latter end of that.
Who said that?
What? All right. So, despite all of that, you are very familiar with all of...
I spent a long time in it.
Right. So, the stories that we are going to be sorting, hopefully we'll get through all of them.
Does it matter? Like, is there such a thing as house bias? Have you found doing this podcast? Like the house that you feel you're sorted in, do you look for more?
I suppose I'm not necessarily seeking it out.
Anytime it's smart or dignified, Michael immediately goes, I think this is a Ravenclaw.
It is worth noting there's house bias just like from our personalities.
Sure.
I'm a Ravenclaw, Reed is a Hufflepuff. You're also
Well,
there's debate on that.
Yeah, so that's why, because I fiercely believe that I'm a Hufflepuff, but when I was sorted, I was sorted into Gryffindor,
which I support.
No, you're a Gryffindor. Shut up.
See, but see, that's what I'm talking about. So then I made the compromise in my mind, which is that I'm the Gryffindor kid who is in the common room of the Gryffindors. I'm the one with the weed hookup.
Yeah, no, you're the Ron. Because Ron is the Hufflepuff of that group. Hermione's a Ravenclaw. Harry Potter is Voldemort. All right, let's go.
Yeah,
let's do some Bible stuff.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's why, when the Sorting Hat was like, yo, you could be a Slytherin. He was
right.
like, no.
If it gave me the choice, I'd probably be like Hufflepuff, and it'd be like, I really think that you should, and I'd be like, give it to me.
But so the stories that we will be dealing with are the Gospel, the story of Paul, Revelations, Solomon, David, Moses, Daniel, Elisha, and Esther.
Okay.
All right, so we're basically just doing the Bible. Let's do it.
Yeah,
there's a bunch of good ones in there.
There's some outside stuff Miller and I discussed off mic that we're like, we've got enough right here. Yeah. So let's start with the Gospel, the story of Jesus.
So that is the term for overall the first 4 books of the New Testament, the story of Jesus, right? So I was thinking about this today. So when you take his whole story, you have to, at first glance, people will probably be like, oh, it's probably just Gryffindor because it's like a Messiah savior story kind of thing. I think it's a Hufflepuff with hints of Ravenclaw.
Well, break down a little bit what happens. If I've never heard of this Bible before, let alone a Jesus character, what happens?
Right, so let's dig in. So he was born with humble beginnings in a food trough for animals to poor people. He was a carpenter for a long time, and then he walked around for a while telling people to be nice to each other and performing miracles and telling rich people to not be so rich and mean people to not be so mean, and then he was killed for it. The end. Well, sort of the end. And then there's the other part where he comes back to life and is the savior and then rises up into heaven and never actually dies. So that's in a nutshell the story of Jesus. So I say Hufflepuff overall because his main deal was hey, be nice to each other, love thy neighbor and all.
Yeah, the golden rule.
Turn the other cheek and all of that. Yeah. And even in a lot of his interactions with people, one of his big miracles was feeding a bunch of people. Cool.
Yeah.
That's, he didn't do a lot of action-y. The one time he got righteously angry and threw all the money changers out of the church. Yeah.
He fucked up some shit. All right, so basically,
go for it.
At the temple, there were straight up people been like, oh, you don't think you can tithe enough? We're gonna just set up banks right here.
Yeah.
And like we're
Make it
basically
easy.
making the churches like, if not like making them like inherently incentive, like you are expected to give money even if you don't have it. But also, I would imagine probably some like weird illegal shit was being covered up.
They were
through
also
that.
selling like animals for sacrifices and like they're like
a
just
whole bunch of shit that the Torah didn't want you
So they turned
doing.
it into a racket,
like
basically.
in the
Yeah.
temple. Yeah.
And so he straight up just went in there and fucking destroyed all of their
He overturned their tables. He fashioned a whip out of like cords or ropes or something.
It's the only time
It
you
was like,
ever see Jesus like lose his shit.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite stories because it seems to be the one that all televangelists don't remember.
If you ever get a sermon about that time, it's always like, well, it was a righteous rage. They were doing wrong things, and obviously
They weren't doing.
like
They were buying jets with their money in the right way.
yeah.
Did you see that video that just went online? I'll link it if we remember. Of these two
We won't.
pastors, these two evangelists explaining why they both needed private jets.
Oh, I think I've seen that clip.
Because if they suddenly heard the voice of God while they were flying, it would be very strange for them to start talking back to God
With a
if
bunch of
they
people
were
around.
on a commercial airliner, and so they need the private jet so they can do their work most efficiently.
I have a retort to that line of logic, and that is God can hear your thoughts. You don't have to say anything. If you hear him, you can just be like,
yeah,
okay, but like in your head.
Yeah, but but then how does everyone else know that you can hear the voice of God?
What if you heard the voice of God and it was like, tell the gospel to everybody on this plane, and you looked around and you're like, shoot, this is my private plane that everybody's already heard it. Like, whoops.
Yeah. It's
So
yes. So
despite the one outburst that Jesus had in the temple with the money changers, overall his like deal was like just like kindness and fairness and being nice and all that.
Right.
Yeah, and socialism.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's your angle on Ravenclaw then?
Okay. So a lot of the times in his story, he like told stories, the parables, which are like extended metaphors for whatever he's trying to say. Also, he would be interacting with like the rich people or like the religious elite of the time, and they'd come to him with like questions and being like, "Oh, I bet you can't answer this one," and he'd always have some little like witty retort to come back with that then is like quoted forever and ever and ever, right? So like that's why I say he's like Hufflepuff, because he's all like, "Be nice to everyone," but then like at
He was
many points in the story,
sassy as hell.
yeah, he was kind of like, actually,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, he always had the receipts ready.
yeah. He was on his game, like wit wise.
I feel fine to sort this as a Hufflepuff with hints
With some
of Ravenclaw in there.
tendencies.
We'll take that little bit of Ravenclaw.
Yeah, like honestly,
Leading
the
into
gospel
that.
the gospel is something that we could really unpack for a while. 'Cause
Yeah.
at least to like
You can really
Christians.
dial into like each part of it and whatever.
The
I
Jewish
actually,
part's
What was your
important.
OOO?
yeah. So I remembered part of Jesus' story, and there's like one of the only other Ravenclaw instances in the Bible that I could think of offhand was Thomas, doubting Thomas, his disciple.
Mm-hmm.
So like after Jesus died and came back to life, but not everyone had seen him yet. Like only the ladies, the Marys, and a couple other the women, and like
the Marys. It sounds like
Yeah,
you're just saying like his gay friends.
no, there's two women
the
named
ladies,
Mary.
Right.
The Marys
His
were like,
mom-
"Hey girl, what's up with that stone? Did
Yeah,
they get moved?"
His mom and his like friend who was a lady who no was not a girlfriend, right? I don't know. That's just like a theory that everybody has. But anyway, so not everyone had seen him yet, and everyone comes back and like, "Yo, he's alive! I swear, like he's alive! He's so cool! He's alive!" And one dude in the room, Thomas, is like, "Bullshit! No, until I can like put my finger in the holes in his hands and like see it myself."
Which, by the way, like not only saying like I have to
Prove
see
it.
you, but I need to stick my finger inside your wounds.
Prove it. He needs like that could be a trick. Like if you just show up and be like, "Look, I got holes," you'd be like, "That's jelly," right? Like, so he's got to prove it. He's right. He's eventually like,
He's
prove
that
it.
dude who like you go to a magic show with, and he just sits there and whispers how he thinks all of the tricks are done.
There's a wire right there. You can't look. Notice that when they put the hula hoop around, they
Okay,
like
I'm just trying to
pivoted
enjoy the
around that
show.
one spot.
I'm just trying to enjoy the show.
Oh, I bet you there was a trap door under that where they just it went
no,
down.
there is.
If you could just be quiet, I'm trying to.
I'm so
Hey,
sorry.
did you know that like there's a false back in that
So
cabinet?
that's Thomas. That's his whole vibe.
Yeah, so Thomas was the one Ravenclaw of the 12. I
Right.
think. And that was my was just like there's
Oh,
a
okay.
little more Ravenclaw in there for you because the rest of the Bible I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
doesn't
he's
have
the
It's
that.
almost
one
like the-
But
person.
then even like in that moment, it's like Ravenclaw shaming because they're like, "Fuck you, Thomas, you didn't believe."
But
Right,
it's
it's
almost
the
like
whole
the
angle of
Bible's
faith.
like, don't worry, this is a book of intelligence. We're going to show that we are seeing all sides here.
All right, moving on,
Yeah.
however, to the story of Paul.
Oh, okay. So this is the other New Testament story. His is kind of nutso. So it starts with him as Saul. So he's like a D-bag. He's like Jewish elite
Mhm.
religious person, and he's going around from town to town persecuting the early church, right? The early, because this is after Jesus. And on the road to Damascus, he then sees Jesus. Jesus appears to him in a bunch of shining glory and says like, "Yo, why are you hunting me?" And he's like, I'm hunting, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, you're hunting me. And he's like, oh, shit. And then he becomes blind.
Mhm.
And Jesus is like, go to the town that you're on your way to, Damascus, and find this guy. And he does. And after like 3 days, the guy like prays on his eyes and then the scales fall off and he can see again. And it's a miracle. And then he changes his name from Saul to Paul because now he's holier.
Mhm.
And then he
He's
goes
for
around.
pious, and S was for sin. They used to call me Saul, but now I'm Paul.
Yeah. So then he goes around from like city to city, like all over the place, and like founds a bunch of churches and writes them letters, which is like the rest of the New Testament is his letters to all those churches. And then he's in jail a lot. Like he is always getting imprisoned by the powers that be because he's starting a new religion.
Yeah, they
And
literally can't handle the truth, man.
it's too much. He's been like shipwrecked a bunch of times. He was bitten by a like venomous snake and like shook it off and was like, God's gonna save me, and was fine, supposedly.
I don't know. This one like kind of strikes me. It's
like an adventure story.
A lot of
almost.
these stories, especially ones having to deal more with like the New Testament and stuff, feel like they're gonna be like Gryffindor-ish,
Yeah.
or Slytherin-ish.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting is like a lot of I was kind of thinking of it earlier, and we'll kind of get to it for later ones, but like a lot of the Bible stories I was thinking was like, oh, there's a lot of like Slytherin-y feels of like, well, the ends justify the means kind of deal. Like it feels that way a lot. When we get to the Old Testament ones, it feels that way a lot. New Testament's a little bit more on like the Gryffindor, sometimes Hufflepuffy, but like Gryffindor for sure.
I would say, I would even posit, and sorry for getting real sacrilegious here for a second.
No,
I
let's
would
do it.
posit that Old Testament God is a Slytherin, New Testament God is a Gryffindor. Because Old Testament God definitely like was more like,
I would be okay with
I'm just
that.
gonna
He's
smite
bringing
the shit out of you.
fivefold plagues.
He was just like a
floods.
scorched earth policy.
Oh, there's one, we'll get to it. There's one story that is like one of my favorite Bible stories. That
And
is
then
the most
some, I
effed
guess
up thing.
something about having a kid makes people soften.
That's the best explanation I've heard for like why New Testament God is so much chiller.
You know, he's like, kid, he's like, man, what am I even doing with this anger? I gotta get it under control.
I can't be setting whole cities on fire with a baby around.
I gotta set a good example for this kid.
Man, God has really changed since he became a father.
You know, I think it's done a lot of good for him. I think he's a much better dude.
I mean, he was like really great when it came to the fights, though. But now he never.
I mean, he's still really full of himself.
You know
That's
that I,
true.
God, can hear you at all times.
Yeah. But like, what are you gonna do about it? Forgive us?
Fuck. If my kid wasn't here, you know what? It's not worth it. You're not worth it.
What? No.
What's our next one?
The next story? Yeah.
Oh, wait, did we sort?
no,
we haven't really sorted Paul.
So Paul, I would go with you and say Gryffindor. He's like pretty Gryffindor. He's a pretty out there doing action cool stuff.
Yeah, as soon as he makes the turn, he
goes
noble
for
and
it.
is just balls to the wall. And also, you then mentioned that the majority of the Bible is really just Paul's
It's
letters.
his letters to those churches that he starts, yeah. And then the end of it is his fever dream that he had when he was stranded on an island.
Oh, and that is...
We'll get there.
And that's Revelation?
Is that next?
Yes, that is.
Oh boy, what a segue.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been some contention, to be fair, that like the Paul that wrote Revelation isn't necessarily the same Paul as the Apostle Paul.
Oh.
I've heard that theory because people were like, well, when did he write it then? Because and I'm like, I don't know, but I think it's the same guy. If anything, he just says, I'm Paul, and then he talks a bunch about God and Jesus and stuff. So, but
Sounds like Paul.
Right.
so Revelation isn't so much a story as a prophecy, and it's hard to kind of, I guess, well, we'll just dig into it. There's like a lot. I'm trying to like remember all the specifics that happen, but like a bunch of crazy stuff happens in Revelation that has to do with like seals being opened and horns being blown in heaven, and all of those things equate to like massive devastation on Earth, worldwide earthquakes, the sun and stars being darkened by a third, which I guess sucks. Water turning into blood, like back to Old Testament kind of Moses-y stuff. It all ends in like the Armageddon and like big old war for everything, where the body count is so high that the blood will raise to a horse's nostril, which is a fun little visual.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I'm shorter than a horse.
Yeah. I hate horses in general, so they can suck it.
What's your general beef with horses?
They
can't become beef. I get it.
No, that's not that's not even it. I don't trust them. I think that they are dangerous, terrible monsters that don't make a lot of sense. Their feet are too small.
To be fair, you're not even supposed to look one in its mouth if someone gives you one.
Right.
Like, apparently that's dangerous.
Is the horse the gift in that? I always thought that the horse was giving me a gift.
No, it's the gift horse.
Because it would hold it in its mouth, and you shouldn't look at the mouth. You should look at the gift.
The gift horse is like a worse giving tree.
All right.
Because it's just...
All right, city boys, shut up. A gift horse is a horse that you get, and you're not supposed to immediately look at its dental, like its teeth, to see if it's healthy.
A good horse.
You should just accept the gift as you're given it.
So it's not to question the merits of whatever it is, just to be happy that you received something.
But should you
I
make sure...
understand that expression
Should
now.
you make sure that you get a gift receipt with the horse, just in case?
You continue to not understand how any of that works.
Yeah, so anyway... I don't trust horses. They suck. Just them getting nervous can make you paralyzed for life.
Yep.
Which is my biggest fear.
My cousin got kicked square in the chest by a horse, and he flew back like 10 feet.
Right? And that horse probably didn't even think about it.
Nah, that horse was stoked he did it.
All right, that's even worse.
Vengeful horse.
Yeah.
It was a mean-ass horse.
No,
okay, so Paul is talking about blood up to the
It's crazy. There's a lot of stuff going on. This is where, if anyone has read the massively popular in the Christian community, the Left Behind series, a couple movies were made based on the first book
Starring
or two.
Kirk Cameron, right?
The first set of movies was made starring Kirk Cameron. A second movie, no one knows this exists. A second movie was made like 4 or 5 years ago, like not that long ago, starring Nicolas Cage.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yes. I know.
I'm strapping the fuck in as soon as I can get some good weed. Yeah.
I read all of those books except the last half of the last book. I literally read through the entire tribulation period and then stopped before everything was fine.
Yeah, you're like, this is getting boring.
I'm over it. Whatever. So there's a lot of craziness going on. And then eventually Satan is defeated and everyone is cast into hell forever except all of the good people, and then
you get raptured.
So that
you don't
just
have to,
seems like
worry
a
about any of this.
fear-mongering
Yeah.
story.
Kinda, yeah. There's 144,000 Jews that are important. They are also good.
Okay.
Oh, so if you're Jewish, you get like
They're
instant
allowed
raptured.
in, which is nice.
Also, I feel like are there more Jews than that now?
There's definitely more than 144,000.
Oh no, they did not take
they didn't account for like
no. There are
population
several
growth.
million Jews.
Yeah.
I think
The thing is, I believe, and this is like it all depends on when you think the rapture happens in accordance to the tribulation, and like if you go by the Left Behind model, it's before everything and whatever. But it's supposed to be like the 144,000 Jews who come to accept Christ after the rapture and tribulation and such.
You always find a good workaround for these
Jews for
things.
Jesus, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a real group.
I know. I've encountered them.
So overall, I would kind of say that Revelation is very Slytherin.
Yes.
Because it's
Super
bonkers
manipulative,
and
yeah.
very like everything's awful
It's
and bloody.
honestly the basis for a lot of denominations. They don't lead by like any sort of like ethics or just trying to teach you to be a better person. Like they teach you
the fire and brimstone.
You have to be good and you have to believe this specific thing or you're gonna go to hell. And it's all just fear based.
Yeah.
And
so it's very I think it's hardcore Slytherin.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a nice note to end the whole Bible on, I think.
Although climate change has me thinking maybe it's not completely unfounded.
Well, there's also this weird theory.
This is after Jesus has moved out, so God has gone back to living alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. He empty nested for a little bit.
And now
was
he's
like,
back to kind of his old ways.
No, if anything, Jesus comes back. He's like fuck, Dad?
You know, there's
Time to get back on your bullshit.
You know that there's a theory that September 23rd, I believe,
Of this year?
of this year, that Planet X is going to collide into the Earth.
Oh.
Yeah,
We haven't seen the planet yet, though.
No, that's the thing. These conspiracy theorists who believe this are saying that it's
First of all, you, right?
Yeah, no, definitely me.
Yeah.
It was actually, I didn't even know about this. I mentioned to somebody that I had gone up and seen the totality of the eclipse.
Sure.
And they responded with, oh, so you're into celestial stuff? And I was like, kind of.
Sure.
And they were like, then you know about Planet X,
Hell
right?
yeah.
And I was like, what
Tell
are
me,
you?
assume I don't and tell me all about it.
And then they told me about how it is an invisible planet that
Already, I'm
NASA
in.
is keeping secret from us that is going to collide into the Earth. And
they don't want people to freak out about it, so they're not telling everybody.
yeah, so presumably we're all going to die on the 23rd
So in like 2
of
weeks,
September.
when we see all of the government officials suddenly get into rocket ships and like blast
Right,
off.
then we'll know what's up.
We know that this isn't true because Trump would have already accidentally talked about it on TV.
Yeah.
He would have been like, folks, when the Earth ends in a couple weeks,
He'd have been like responding to like the hurricane or something and been like, well, you know, what's it matter, right? The Planet X is going to happen. So whoops, anyway.
now I need all of the 9s and 10s from the women in the crowd to get on my spaceship.
You know who you are. If you don't, we have a panel over here who can assess you.
All of that said, let's move on to Solomon because he's somebody who judges.
Yeah.
That's
so the
slightly
Solomon
decent
is
segue.
interesting. He's generally known as like the wisest person, I guess, ever. If you're going by like
Wise King Solomon.
if you were to ask my dad, like, who's the wisest person ever? He'd probably be like, well, Solomon.
You wouldn't say God?
Well, person.
Jesus? What, you wouldn't say Jesus?
He's still God. I know. He's that 100% God, 100% human weird quandary that doesn't make sense when you try to dig into it. So you just got to believe it. That was unpack that statement.
Oh, somebody's got some stuff.
Yeah.
Pressed in there.
Where were we?
Solomon.
So he's the wise one.
Yes.
Which is showcased in the worst possible way.
You mean the cutting the baby in half thing?
Solomon is so fucking weird.
He had a bunch of others, like a couple other stories, but the most notable and most known is the one where 2 women came to him claiming mothership of the same baby, which no one else was there when it was born. Like nobody.
No, it's like a weird thing because paternity is something that you can question very easily. But maternity is like pretty cut and dry.
Someone was there.
So like,
Well,
yeah.
and not only that,
Cut
like
and dry. I see what you did there.
there are like 2 situations that can play out. Either both of these women were pregnant, had children, one of these children vanishes, and then the other one,
as Jewish babies are wont to do.
then the other one thefts the person's baby,
tries to theft,
is caught, and then they're like, ma.
You know
The
what?
other scenario, because the only reason I say that both of them are pregnant in that scenario is just so they have the evidence of like, I was pregnant for 9
People
months.
remember me
like,
being pregnant.
otherwise,
But to be fair, like back then they probably didn't have a very good idea of like how pregnancy even worked.
I don't know. I think like
I feel
everyone
like
would
they've figured out the
deduce.
basic
What if she was
mechanics.
just a larger lady who was also a liar?
Maybe.
She just happened to be a larger
The
lady.
alternate to this would be like a traveling midwife sort of situation where she helps deliver the baby and then is like, ah,
It's
I
mine
now have
That's
a
a
baby.
good scam.
That's
And
like
nobody-
a Shakespearean play.
Yeah, and then
Yeah, so, like-
nobody knows her, so
what
they don't
happened-
have anything.
So what is wise old Solomon
So
tell them
his
to do?
solution here is be like, well, if both of you say that you're the mother, then I say we just split it evenly, and we'll just go ahead and cut the baby right down the middle. It doesn't specify if he means like hot dog or hamburger, like long ways or
And whether you're
Or
gonna
the
put
middle,
mustard
like,
and
the face
mayo.
part.
right. I want the face part or I want the legs, and probably down the middle.
Like that solution, like if we just took it on face value, I'd be like, that dude needs to be middle management yesterday.
Yeah.
Like just like the
No,
dumbest
he's
solution
king.
to
He's
a
in
terrible
charge.
problem.
But then of course one of the women is like, okay, I'm cool with that.
Seems fair.
Yeah, and the other one's like, no, she can have it then. And it's like, all right, well then obviously that's the real woman, the real
I
mother.
love the idea that the only way that you would care for the life of a child is if you actually bore it. But if you didn't,
Yeah,
that's to say someone who doesn't have a child is fine with seeing a child murdered in front of them.
I started this day with no children. I'll be happy to end it with half children.
What is her end game when she's like, yeah, I'm cool? Like, was she looking to see a child murdered today?
Maybe it was an element of like, if you can't have the baby, no one can.
Ooh,
Right?
real
But
spiteful.
Shakespearean play.
But also, she's a person who stole a baby. She might not be operating on, let's
This
say,
is
on
true.
all cylinders. Yeah.
You're right. You said person, and for a second I thought you said Persian, and then I was like, maybe that's accurate. And
I just end up being like a crazy Bible scholar who knows like the origin of every character.
it was a lot of Persia at the time.
But there are other tales of Solomon.
Yeah, I mean,
correct?
a lot of it is that he went around trying to basically kind of experience all he could. He was very like fact-findy, which is his excuse for why he had like hundreds, like dozens of wives and hundreds of concubines and a shit ton of money and a lot of wine.
So he was smart and popular.
He figured
and
it all out.
rich.
He just had it all going. His dad was like the most famous king in like a long ass time.
Speaking of Solomon's
Famous dad.
famous dad.
Yeah.
Let's talk about King David.
Great. Well, okay. There's two stories. One when he is king and one when he's not.
Oh
that
wait,
I kinda wanna
we haven't
focus on.
sorted Solomon.
Oh right. So I would say he's Ravenclaw.
Yeah,
He's like the other Ravenclaw, and
Great.
actually the one that's like okay with everybody.
Right. Moving on.
Yeah.
So back to David.
Right.
King David.
So before there's two stories, and I think they sort differently, which is why I bring up both. The first is David and Goliath, which is before he's King David.
Yeah.
He's just a little boy, like 13 or whatever, which I guess is not.
He wasn't of noble blood before
he was
that, right?
he was the son of a shepherd.
No, but the minute
was
that
a
you
shepherd.
sling a stone into a giant's head, that's your drawing the sword from the stone moment.
Yeah, it really kind of was. Well, technically, his drawing the sword from the stone moment was when Samuel showed up at his house. There was a prophet walking around named Samuel, and he showed up at Jesse's house. Jesse was David's dad, and Jesse had like 7 or 8 sons, and David was the youngest. And so he was out in the field watching sheep, and Samuel's like, call all your sons forward. And he does, and they all line up, and he's like, no. Where's the person I'm looking for isn't here. And he's like, no, these are all my like dope sons.
I wish that I had Jesse's son.
So then he's like, oh, but no, these are my good sons. There's only other like little David in the
Little
field.
shitty David back there.
Yeah. He's just watching the sheep, and Samuel's like, bring me him. And he does, and he makes David kneel down, and he anoints him with oil. He just pours a thing of oil on his head, which is a symbol that David will then be the next
and
king.
then he puts the glass slipper on his foot and it fits.
And David blasts
Can
off
you
into
imagine
space.
being a kid and like your friend's dad is like, come here, kid. Kneel down.
Blah, blah, blah,
just
blah, blah.
throws a bunch of oil over you and goes like, you'll be a king
You're
someday.
going to be a king one day.
And
Was
you're
it
like,
before
"Ugh."
or after Goliath?
Before.
Before. Okay, so everyone in the city just was like, yo, that greasy kid is gonna...
I don't even think that it was like publicized is the thing, which is why I'm like weirded out by this whole system. Like,
All right, so back to Goliath.
yeah. So the Israelites are at war with the Philistines, and all of David's brothers go off to be in the army while David stays back with the sheep. And he's like, man, I want a life of adventure. I want to fight in the army. Blah 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 blah. So then he sneaks off and goes and like peeks over and sees kind of what's going on, and all of the Israelites are like super afraid and won't like fight because the Philistines have Goliath, and Goliath is a giant by most historian standards, at least 9 feet tall, which is huge, especially since people back then were a lot shorter,
Right.
on average.
They're
So
probably like my height if they were tall.
so
I'm
he was
5'3".
he was probably like at least double most people,
Right.
like in terms
I
of
don't know.
height.
I always imagined him as like a lot taller. 9 feet doesn't
and when
seem
you
like
see him
shit.
in like Bible stories, like in the picture books and stuff, he's like a literal giant.
I
and
don't
it's
know
like,
why, because like obviously I'm a very like feeble person, and so like someone even just a foot taller than me could
Yeah.
probably kick my ass. But 9 feet makes me go, what? That's
Think
not
like-
that big deal.
Think like maybe even like a taller version by like a foot or two of like the mountain from Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Right? Like big ass dude, right? So
Right.
everyone is like, oh no, we're so afraid. We're just Israelites or whatever. And the Philistines are like, we'll laugh at you, but not attack you. We'll all just sit in our lines and like not have war, I guess.
They're
So-
probably gonna like starve him out or something.
Yeah, so David goes down to the banks of the river and he picks up 5 smooth stones because Goliath had 4 brothers that like no one remembers. So he's like, I'm gonna get 1 rock for each Goliath bastard, you know?
Yeah.
So then he goes to the front lines and just goes out and is like, I will fight you, very like Katniss Everdeen sort of like me sort of deal. And they send Goliath forward to face this kid, and then he, with faith, slings it from his sling and hits him square in the forehead and kills him in one shot. And then the Philistines surrender, so he doesn't end up having to use the other 4 rocks.
I like to imagine that like maybe Goliath had an undiagnosed tumor and
Right?
it just got pushed further into his brain
Yeah.
or something in that moment.
Yeah.
Or like he had an aneurysm or a heart attack.
Just that
'cause I can't-
coincidence time.
Yeah.
He's a big dude. His heart couldn't hold out that long, right?
I mean,
Like,
as
either
far
way,
as
it's
strategy,
still miraculous timing.
right? As far as strategy goes, though, it's like, all right, hubris was dictating all of the Philistines' planning, because one-on-one combat in that situation
Right.
is like, no, just stop. Like, don't even give them the
Yeah,
opportunity
it
of
was like a weird like trial by combat when it wasn't necessary.
right,
You know?
because you're just
You send your champion, we'll send ours, except our champion, we can just kill you all. We can just win if we just fight now.
yeah.
So
Okay, so that's story number 1.
that's David's first story, David and Goliath, and I would classify that as Gryffindor.
yeah, that
Yeah.
seems pretty
Very call to
straightforward.
adventure sort of.
For real. And also because like there's it's like very two-dimensional characters. in
Yeah,
this
I'm
one.
the boy with the heart of gold, and
I'm
gonna,
the evil giant.
Yeah. And they're the Philistines, right? And even since then, like since that story, Philistine is like a kind of an insult.
Yeah, it is a derogatory
Yeah.
note to
You
it.
so dumb. You would send a giant to fight a little boy. You a Philistine.
And lose.
Yeah.
And they had 4 more Goliath brothers. Like, I don't understand. They could just like link arms and run forward.
It would be a very different story if that happened. They just were like, you just killed our brother, and then
Goliath wall activate. Yeah. So the second story of David is David and Bathsheba, which is when he's king. And that is a story of David was out on his balcony one day in his palace, and he looked out and saw on another like rooftop or balcony or whatever, he saw a woman, Bathsheba, who was married, bathing. Her name is Bathsheba. Can you imagine the coincidence? So he sees her bathing, and he's like, yo, I want that. Like, that's the one. I need her.
Uh-huh.
Up here. So he.
it's worth noting David pointed to his junk
yeah.
when he said up here.
Yeah, that's exactly. King David did point to his junk when he said up here.
I forgot. It's written in the Old Testament.
Yeah. And lo, he did gesture towards his junk.
And say, I want this up here, which sounds like you're saying like you want. That's too graphic for me to even say. Go on.
All right. So then one of his advisors is like, that's nice and all, but like, she married. And he's
Remember
like,
those 10 commandments and all that.
right? That's like number 6 or something. I know that 4 is honor thy father and mother. I'm pretty sure that's 4. It might be 5, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Anyway, so someone's like, oh, she's married. And he's like, all right, no problem. So he calls forth the dude, the husband, and he's like, you're a great person who works for me in my army. What a shitty guy. And he's like, you should go to this post, which is a frontline position, and go there. Because
That's
I trust
fucked.
you. And he does, obviously, because the king commanded him. And he dies. So then...
Damn.
Yeah. So then David's like, well, now that Bathsheba is husbandless, she needs someone to care for her. So invite her on over. And he might have invited her over before technically the husband died, but after he was sent away.
In any and all
Oh.
cases, that's a Slytherin-esque story.
Oh, yeah. That's
He
why
was
I was
straight
like,
up
he sorted
like,
differently.
Girl, you shouldn't be alone right now.
Yeah, it was.
Your husband is like out to war. Anything could happen. Oh no, he died.
Yeah,
That sucks.
It was underhanded
Ooh,
AF.
All right.
So Slytherin for second David story.
I mean,
full heel turn there.
Yeah.
Another.
he asked for forgiveness later and was eventually forgiven and is still a widely loved king.
Yeah, he's also responsible for the Second Temple, I believe.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
But then there was also a Temple of Solomon.
that's true. So now we have Moses.
Oh.
Another notable
Yeah.
one.
This one's fun. This is a fun story.
And we're running through the whole tale of Moses.
We can go real quick. If
It's
you've
a
just
long
seen the
one.
movie Prince of Egypt,
Yeah.
then you're good to go. Or I guess the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston.
Yeah.
But
Both valid.
yeah. So he was a baby, a Hebrew baby, and his mother sent him down the river for a better life.
I think they weren't thinking like they're gonna kill all the Hebrew
they were
babies.
killing all
For
the
any life.
male Jewish babies
Yeah.
born around that time due to, I believe, a prophecy.
Sure, it's always a prophecy.
Oh yeah, they were straight up like, one of the sons of the Jewish people are gonna fucking
lead
are
us
gonna,
out of
are gonna fuck you.
captivity.
Yeah, they're gonna fuck your shit up, Pharaoh. And he was like, just kill him. And then the baby gets sent to him, right?
Sidebar, wouldn't Herod have known that story so then when he tried that when Jesus was born, been like, well, it's obviously not going to work because of like stupid God stuff, right? Like he tried to do that.
Divine intervention and all that.
And then Joseph had a dream with an angel and was like, go to Egypt. Ironic that they have to go to Egypt.
There's poetic justice in all of this.
All right.
We're also working backwards, I like.
Yeah.
So far through
Backwards in time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we were like, let's start with Jesus.
Yeah.
Then we move forward in time. And then we move back. Anyway.
All right.
So
he's sent down the river. He's found by Pharaoh's daughter who takes him and adopts him as her own. Then he's raised alongside his brother, who is heir to be Pharaoh. And then
He's seen like all of this, like he's just seeing like the Jewish people like enslaved.
yeah, but he's living the life of royalty.
Yeah, does he
And
know
is-
he's Jewish?
no,
Does
he
No.
doesn't. It's not until the burning bush.
I
that-
don't think he does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Or no, there's
They might have told him.
there's some
but, like,
point before the burning bush
Yeah.
that he finds out that he's an Israelite or
Mm.
Hebrew. Yeah.
Back then it was Hebrew.
Yeah.
Says the totally white, not at all Jewish guy.
To the Jew.
Yeah. Let me correct you on that, sir. Actually. All right. So then he sees one day he like sees the workers making a temple or whatever. Workers, slaves, making a temple. And one of them is being whipped by an Egyptian slave driver, and he steps in and kills the dude. And then he basically goes into exile because he killed an Egyptian. And in that exile, then has the burning bush experience where he stumbles upon a bush that is on fire and speaks to him with the voice of God, telling him to go back and free his people, the Hebrews. And then he does, and he finds his brother, Aaron, who's his brother, who is in existence, but didn't have to be sent down the river.
Maybe he was born late. I think it was his younger brother.
It was his younger brother, but like, it's
and
funny.
it's his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam,
Yes.
correct?
So
So they all join up.
or
maybe Miriam
is his
Aaron-
wife.
Aaron's wife.
We should really get bogged down in these details and not like just tell what the
All right.
story's about.
Sorry, I'm like,
who's Miriam?
Moses gets married
she
to
sings
someone.
after they cross the Red
Yeah.
Sea.
Yeah.
It's great.
Moses gets married to someone, and then he goes back, and he demands an audience with Pharaoh, and he goes back and he's like, "Let my people go," and he's like, "No," and then he's like, "Well, God will whatever." Oh, but before that, he throws.
His staff down and it turns into a
The
snake.
two magi of the court throw their staffs down and turn them into snakes, like cobras. And then Moses is like, all right, and throws his staff down, and it's a bigger snake that eats both of those.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And then turns back into a staff, I hope.
Right, I believe so.
That would be
And
like the
then they're
dopest.
like, "Whoa,
Like,
we're
where's
at
the other two
staffs
staffs?
now."
Like, this is a triple staff now. Like, so then that happens, and then he's like, well, God's gonna like punish you for this and whatever. And then there's the 10
Plagues.
Mhm.
and they increase in terribleness.
Mhm.
Frogs and boils and water into blood and darkness, I think was
You're
one
all
of them.
out of order.
I
but
know. Fire from the sky, and then all culminating in freaking
Death of the firstborn child.
The firstborn child who doesn't have blood, lamb's blood, over the doorposts.
that's Passover.
Yayo. So a lot of children are murdered by God.
And one of them is Pharaoh's own son,
Right.
the heir to the throne, which obviously makes him a little upset,
Yep.
at which point he's like, fuck it, you can go.
Yeah. So then they all leave, and then he's like, "Fuck it,
Let's
no,
go
they
after
can't."
him.
He's like, oh wait, all my slave labor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't consider this decision when I was emotionally distraught over the death of my child.
Almost like how the American people aren't really considering how they are like losing their migrant labor that they are exploiting anyway when they tell them not to like have any people immigrate to the country, and then now we have all of our crops that are rotting
Right,
out of the
I read
ground.
that.
Yeah.
That like a bunch of them were just sitting there because there was no one
all
to
the
give them.
jobs that all these white people say that they want, they're there. Go take them. Our food's rotting. Anyway, go ahead.
So the Pharaoh's like, "Fuck this! I'm gonna get them." So then he chases them all out, and then it's the last big miracle of the story, which is they cross, or Moses parts the Red Sea, and the sea parts up, and then they cross, and the Egyptians pursue, and then the sea's like, "Fuck you," and then crashes down on them and drowns a bunch more people in the name of God.
Yep.
So then,
And then you think after that, all right, the hard part's over
You would
for the
think.
Jewish
Nope.
people.
Now they're going to be wandering in the desert for 40 years.
That's because they showed up to the promised land, but there were goddamn giants in it. Like, that's the story. They showed up and like, oh, there are giants here. And then the scouts come back and are like, yo, everyone, there's giants in the promised land. They're like, fuck, we're scared. And God's like, fuck you for being scared. Like, why wouldn't they be scared?
Well, and then it's even better because in the story of Moses, they go to Mount Sinai, they get the 10 Commandments.
15, maybe. There's a theory.
If we're going off of
What are
History of the
those
World
deep
Part
cut
1,
commandments?
it's just a History of the World Part 1 reference. Mel Brooks comes down with 15. And he's
It's
like,
like,
I've got 15. He breaks.
I've got 10
Oh,
commandments.
I was like, I've never heard of
No,
this.
so when
The lost 5 commandments.
but when Moses goes up
Smoke
to Mount
weed every day is number 4.
when Moses goes up to Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments, all the Jews are like, oh, let's build a golden calf and worship it.
Yeah, what a weird decision to make.
They like melt the gold that they had taken off of all the Egyptian
stuff,
soldiers. Just, it's fucked. Like, they do all the deplorable stuff that they can in that moment. They make a golden calf. Moses comes down and is like, what the fuck are you doing? Breaks the 10 Commandments as like he's pissed, and then is like,
Also
oh,
explodes the golden calf.
right, also explodes the golden calf, and then is like,
With
oh shit,
The power of God.
I need you guys to actually, I need those 10 commandments.
gotta
I
go
need to
down.
go back up. To which point God is like, yo, you broke the 10 commandments. You can't go into the land of Canaan.
Why did he have to go back and get more? Didn't he read them and know what they were, and then he could just make new tablets himself?
Yeah, but I think he needed to go commune with God again.
Whatever.
But
It was just an excuse.
At which point God is like, you aren't allowed into Israel because you let wrath control you, which is like, come on, God. Like, do you know who you
So
are?
none of that generation.
I would have been like, that wasn't one of the 10.
Yeah.
You didn't say I can't get mad ever.
Yeah, especially getting mad at them breaking one of the 10. Like, the first of the 10.
Like
is
I
thou shalt
said,
have no other gods before me.
Old Testament guy, like,
Oh,
very
he's
much,
real
like,
erratic.
all over the place.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So then that whole generation had to die off before they could get into the promised land, which is why they walked around for like 40 years.
Mm-hmm. But they were provided with manna from heaven.
Yeah, right?
That's like
Cool.
the nice little, like, you can get that.
Space bread. Yeah. So it's a tough one because it's like a long story with a lot of dips and curves and stuff. I think that if you're taking it from the overall, like, from Moses's point of view and like the intended like moral of the story, it's very Gryffindor.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
There are moments where I don't think it's a Hufflepuff,
No.
but I think you can make arguments for both Ravenclaw and Slytherin.
Yeah. More Slytherin, I think, in my head. If you try to look at it from like a very objective standpoint, or for some reason from the Egyptians' point of view, then you're like, fuck, this is shitty.
Right.
But I think overall that would be Gryffindor.
Yes.
That's like a mean Gryffindor boy.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's jump on back to Daniel.
Oh, okay. This is pretty simple. He's the dude who works for the king, and I'm like forgetting the very beginning part of the story. But some dudes get mad at Daniel, so they orchestrate to have him like basically betrayed and out of the king's favor. So they throw him in the lion's den to like as his execution, and he has faith in God, and the lions don't eat him for like days, and then he's let out because the king is like, oh, obviously you have favor with God. You are a dope dude. That's like the whole story.
That's actually kind of a similar tale with Joseph as well.
The Dreamcoat.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
in the fact that he was sort of like his brothers were like, fuck this guy, and then he
Saw
got
him into slavery and beat him up and everything, and then he became like the prophet to the king and the dream.
dream coat.
Yeah,
There's like a pretty.
well, like the dream.
How he could interpret
Yeah.
the Pharaoh's dreams.
There's a lot more contention in the Bible about a lot of these other figures, but it's pretty widely accepted that this one is not a historical figure. That this is just like
Oh,
a
Joseph.
faithful dude.
yeah, like, Daniel.
Oh, Daniel. Gotcha.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
just
the
like a faithful dude. Who,
The Daniel's just a story that was written to like teach this lesson
Yeah.
instead of like
it shares a lot of similarities with the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as well.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I actually have 3 USB drives that I bought in like a pack of 3, and those are their names. That's like the worst nerdy thing.
fucking Bible nerd.
Right? But their real quick story is that King Nebuchadnezzar said everybody needed to worship him or an idol or something, worship something that wasn't God. And these 3 faithful dudes were like, no, we won't. And he's like, I'll throw you in the furnace. And they're like, do it. So he did. And then they didn't burn. And when someone looked into the furnace to see like if they were burning, he's like, no, they're not burning. And also there's a 4th guy in there, like who's real like crazy, cool, shiny looking. And then they came out and were fine. And apparently there was like an angel in there or whatever.
All of those are probably Gryffindors.
Yeah. Yeah. Daniel is a very Gryffindor story.
Although,
Yeah.
maybe you could make the argument of Hufflepuff.
Why's that?
Of like
loyalty kind of argument.
like a loyalty argument, because loyalty and
I can see that
faith are
because
sort of
Daniel, it's not a very active, like, it's very passive. Like,
Well, and
Daniel is thrown in the lion's den and is faithful and loyal, and that's how he gets through it.
right.
It's not like bold and daring.
Right. It's not a Slytherin. It's not a Ravenclaw.
Actually, I will go Hufflepuff on Daniel.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
because it's pretty passive loyalty. He's just like,
Also-
I'm not gonna not say I don't want.
also with Joseph, because he's like, yo, let's get into these dreams,
Let's just
baby.
think about this for a while. That's kind of Ravenclaw.
I know.
think.
I would say
Maybe.
Joseph is definitely a Gryffindor because he's pretty vain. Like he's like the whole reason like his brothers get pissed is because he won't stop showing off his
that
coat.
coat.
Well, that might
And
be
then
more
like
Slytherin.
later, he also like is like he plays a fucking like prank on his brothers by
does.
like saying like
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
gonna execute one of you guys for stealing from
No,
me.
no, so that's not a Gryffindor. That's a Slytherin.
Gryffindor I think would pull a dick move like that
Oh, maybe.
because the Slytherin would just kill one of them.
Yeah,
The
Gryffindor would stop just short and be like, "Did you learn your lesson?
Yeah.
Never do that again."
Do we want to go to Elisha or Esther? Elisha? Okay. What's Elisha's
Okay,
tale?
so this story is kind of fucked up. This is the one that I mentioned earlier. So Elisha is a prophet, not to be confused with Elijah, the one who ascended in the fiery chariot and all that.
Mhm.
This is-
And you pour out a cup for him
Yeah.
during Passover.
This is not that dude. This is another dude, Elisha. Elisha was bald. That's important. So Elisha was walking around like outside of a town, and the specific text says a group of young lads came from the town. And like I love that it says just a group of lads, so like specifically a group of like young boys. It's actually a lot. It's like it's at least 43 kids. And I know that. We'll get to how I know that later. So Elisha's walking around and this group of young lads comes out of the town and they start mocking him for being bald. They say, as far as the translation of the Bible that I had says, they say, "Go up, bald head."
That
A
sounds
bunch.
like some lads.
Go up, bald head. Go up, bald head. Right?
Go up where? What does that mean?
Keep in mind, it's at least 43 kids yelling "Go up, bald head." Right? That's kind of terrifying.
Damn.
when you don't have much to do, I guess the only thing you do is
Go
go
yell at
around
the prophet.
town and yell at the prophet.
All right, so then they start yelling at him for being bald, "Go up, bald head," and apparently he takes it kind of hard. So he, as a prophet of the Lord, he curses the children in the name of God, and 2, specifically it says, female bears come from a forest nearby and kill 42 children. That is how I know there are at least 43, because the story survived.
Oh, yeah, because Elijah's probably not telling this story to people.
Right? What'd you do? Oh, I summoned god bears to kill 42 kids because they said I was bald, which I clearly am.
Now I feel like this is gonna be I feel like we're gonna debate this one a long time.
That's the story of Elisha.
This is a Ravenclaw story.
Ooh, why do you say that?
Oh, I'm just fucking with Michael.
Oh, good, yeah.
What the hell?
I'm not taking ownership of that.
It's
They're
a
like,
fucked
"Get
up
out of here,
story.
Baldy," and he's like, "Kill them, my bear queens."
Right, and the problem I have with it is like it's told from the point of view that like Elisha's the good guy, and like yeah, fuck those kids.
Yeah, that was justified.
Right, like those kids shouldn't have made fun of a prophet. They should know better.
But instead of casually schooling them on like maybe you should be kind to one another,
He cursed him in the name of God to death
This seems like
by
okay.
mauling, and like 2 bears killing 42 kids before they scatter is crazy.
it's also interesting. The distinction is that they're lads, which makes me believe that they are like preteen, teens. They're not.
I imagine like 10 to 12.
Yeah.
Oh, 10 to 12? Like, yeah. So, but still.
You know, shitty kids.
So here's how I think this shit went down. And like, if this happened in real life, so Elijah's walking with his bald head, and these kids come out and start being like, "Get out of here, baldy asshole!" And then them being loud, 42 children being loud, just like happened to bring these bears out.
Here's the thing,
they
though.
killed them. No, but
But
they
bears
killed
are
them.
scared by-
They killed them, and then Elijah went, "I must have made this happen because
I'm just gonna tell you, having been to many a national park, bears are very skittish. They are not attracted to sound. They will
These were
run
2
the fuck
starving
away
bears.
from.
I'm just
Female
saying,
bears.
my point of my story of what I'm saying is this just happened to happen, and then this guy was like, "I must be a prophet."
Yeah.
Everybody, I killed these
Again,
children.
They made fun of me, and then God killed them
Just
for me.
like with David and Goliath being like, I'm prone for this spot to be the thing. You're always looking for those like very happenstance miracles.
Yeah.
Like in like basically in Bible times, you would become a religious figure. Just some crazy shit happened to happen to you.
My question is like why like what different makes you a prophet? Like we've talked about a couple now, like Elisha just walking around cursing kids for calling them bald, and Samuel who walks around pouring oil on kids. Like what they just one day were like, "Hey, God spoke to me," and everyone's like, "Cool, what did he
I
say?"
think
Like-
you just have to have the confidence. If you're like,
I guess.
you either know you're a prophet or you don't. You
Yeah.
know. What's
like
next?
speaking in tongues and whatnot.
Where are you feeling that this is, Reed?
It's a Slytherin.
It's for
what?
sure Slytherin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the Old Testament stuff, very ends justify the means. I'm telling you.
Like
Whoa.
God was just having a bad day. He's like, "Yeah, fuck those kids. I'm bald too. Get the fuck out of
All
here."
right.
Send 2
Closing out with
bears.
Esther.
Great. One of the only woman-centric stories of the Bible.
Hell yeah, Esther
Yeah.
rules.
Yeah.
I told you before the pod, I was like, we're going to get to Esther and we're going to get a hell yeah from Reed. And exactly that.
It was perfect. So I am a little fuzzy on the story of Esther. I like briefly looked it up today. But essentially she was like a queen, one of the like queens or wives of the ruler of the area of Persia. I think it's the Persian queen. And Haman, the dude who was like advisor to the king, hated the Jews, and like a lot of people do. And so he decided to basically he made some contribution to the king or something that allowed him to get permission to exterminate all of the Jews and take all of their shit.
As you do at that time.
Yeah, he's like, well, the king said I could, so like, all right, boys, let's go round them up and take their shit and then kill them. Like they specifically were then like also exterminate, which is never happened. So I guess to that point, it had only happened a couple times. So the news of that decree like doesn't even get back to Esther, but like it takes a little bit to get back to her because she's like sequestered in like her queenly time, and she cannot see the king unless she is called for. Like that's the big rule, or she'll be put to death. Like that's the deal. And
That's a weird relationship.
Mhm. And she hasn't been called on by the king in like over 30 days, which is culturally like a thing that shows that she may have fallen out of favor. Now she was Jewish, but like people didn't know that.
Yeah, she was closeted.
Yeah. And so she then's like, fuck it. If I die, I die. I'm going to do this. And she goes in and has an audience with the king anyway. And she puts on all of her royal robes and whatever. And it says that he was delighted at her doing this. So apparently that worked out. So
Turns out
he was like, oh shit, I
he
forgot
was
to
a
call you.
feminist, and it was just the culture around him that was toxic.
He was just like, oh shit, I meant to text you. Did it not go through? Oh no, I thought you were ignoring me. Like it was one of those things. So she invites him and Haman to a banquet.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a great time, and she charms them both with her being a wonderful, charming lady. And she's like, we should do this again tomorrow. Both of us should do all three of us should do this again. And they're like, okay. So then the next day, they do it again, and they're super charmed. And as soon as the king is like beguiled by her charms, she drops the bomb on him and is like, I'm Jewish. This guy wants to kill all of us, including me. And then they kill him instead.
Yeah. It's a pretty solid turn. It's like kind of Slytherin.
Right. It's like Slytherin, but for good, which is, I think, people of Slytherin really hope for a lot of the time.
Also, I think that this ultimately, as my friend Bowen Yang would say, ultimately tells a queer narrative. It is all about ostracization and how like femmes are raised in the culture and also coming out of the closet.
Okay.
With a couple of straights. Let's move on.
I feel that it is a Slytherin, but I
think most of her tactics were Slytherin, but the inciting part was her being bold enough to say, fuck it, if I die, I die.
Sure,
I'm
but
on my fancy robes and going.
That's an attribute that Slytherins are known to have. It's,
boldness?
They're usually...
Risk takers.
They have a degree of risk in what they do.
I would say I always say it comes down to, because I think that Gryffindors and Slytherins are just like motivated differently. Slytherins are self-motivated and self-interested, and Gryffindors are more for the greater good. So we'd have to figure out if Esther was just trying to save her own skin,
herself, or
if she was
else.
trying to save everyone. And I am of the opinion, just from my readings, that, and maybe it was just like a biased
the way it's
interpretation,
presented,
that she was trying to save everybody.
Yeah.
So I would put her in Gryffindor. But I guess it just depends
because
on...
it was a more selfless motivation.
Yeah, it just depends on whether you think she was doing it for herself or not.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. I think it's Gryffindor that's like played slightly underhanded.
I don't have a horse in this race. In either case, I get Purim as a holiday, which we celebrate Esther's bravery.
Shouldn't have a horse anyway.
Right, because we hate horses.
We all do? Yay!
That's what we've established on this podcast.
Let's make that official for the pod.
We have a staunch anti-horse position on this
horses.
podcast.
We're never going to be sorting horses on this podcast.
Horse breeds? Yeah.
All right. And with that, I would like to thank David Miller for joining us on this Bible-themed...
We ran out of Bibles?
I mean, there are
There's
others.
No more Bible.
There are others, but those are the main ones.
There's more. There's you can do like Adam and Eve and the creation story and whatever, but like...
We should just find we should have you back on to do just like the weirdest ones we can find.
Yo, there's some crazy ones.
Not the greatest hits like we did today.
There's even like smaller parts of well-known stories that people are like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to have you back for that.
Great.
Until then, where can we be finding more of you? Obviously on the Twitch channel for Mountain Dew.
Twitch.tv/MTNDEW, Mountain Dew, but like without vowels.
Do they still say that? Sorry if they don't.
Yeah, but not a lot. I don't know. Like, we don't say it a lot.
We're not getting paid.
It's a very casual channel. Like, we don't, like, if you tune in, we're not like, Mountain Dew, Mountain Dew, Mountain Dew. We like mention it, but like, it's me. Like,
when are you guys streaming?
Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 6 to 8 Pacific time.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And we also can find you on Twitter.
Yes, at MillerD, MILLERD.
That is.
I got my Twitter account a long time ago, so it's a good one.
That's very straightforward. You can find me on Twitter at Belated Media. You can find Reed Brice at That Dang Dingus. Also, Reed Brice, you have a show that is coming up that's in previews right now.
Oh yeah, we're in previews right now. At the Second City, it's a new premium show going up. It's called Some Fucking Advice, and I really hope it plays every Saturday at 9:30, and I hope I can have you come out if you're a local to the area.
Dope.
Yeah. Wonderful. And you can also follow us at sortinghat_pod. We've been running a bunch of polls so you can participate in the sorting process.
They're all stupid and so funny.
Real dumb.
Yeah.
But
that's what internet does best.
Yeah. So help us sort, and thank you once again for joining us on this biblical edition of The Sorting Hat.
Thank me very much.
Our God is an awesome God.
Oh man, don't get me started on those songs.